What is up, my math maniacs? Looking at section 1.4 to 1.6. We have 13 little doozies of problems to look at here. On this first one, in all these problems, you are the detective, right? You're given information, so it's imperative that you know what the information means. Also, that where are we going? What kind of answer do they want? And then how do we use that information to get there? So here, very important to read information given to you. So we need it in slope-intercept form, so you need to know that that means y equals mx plus b. It needs to go through the point 0, -5, also a hidden hint there. Parallel, we need to know what that means, and that means they have the same slope. And this is the original line. So the first thing here is to solve for y, because what we must know is slope. Slope allows us to then move forward, because either you're going to use parallel, which is the same slope, which is -2, or you're going to need perpendicular, like in the next couple problems, which means opposite reciprocal. Once we know this information, we know one out of the two unknown variables. So we're looking for slope, and we're looking for b, the y-intercept. So since we know that, we're just going to use the y equals mx plus b to find out what b is. So here it is, and then we simply plug in. So this is my x value, so 0 goes in for x. Y is -5, so that goes in for my y. We just found our slope m, so that is -2. And we don't know what b is. So 0 times 2 is 0, and we're left with -5, so we know that our b is -5. So when we replace y equals mx plus b with our slope of -2 and our y-intercept of -5, we have our final solution. And this will be the format that we're looking for the next couple of problems, all very similar. So we have to first find out what is our slope. Are we using parallel or perpendicular? And moving on that pattern. For this next one, we are looking at perpendicular, so that means opposite reciprocal. So same format. We need to solve for y to find out what our slope is. Our slope is -3. The perpendicular slope, that's what the symbol means, is the opposite reciprocal, so we get a positive 1/3. Then we're going to be using y equals mx plus b, using the y given to us, which is 5, using the x given to us, which is 3, using a slope we just found, which is 1/3, plus b, solve for b, and we get 4, and then we just replace the m and the b with the values that we just found. In the next problem, we're given x is equal to 7, which means we have undefined slope, which is a vertical line, and perpendicular to that is the opposite reciprocal, which would just be 0 slope, which is y equals 0x plus b. And so it's simply just y equals 7 if we just look at the given point. Very easy problem. Here we're given the word origin, which we must know is 0, 0. And the other problems we were actually given a point, so this one they kind of hides it in a word. Once again, we're given an equation, which we must have to solve for y so that we know what our slope is. Our slope here is -7. We are looking for perpendicular, so therefore we need opposite reciprocal, which is 1/7. And then we proceed just like we did in the preceding problems. We replace our y with 0. We replace our x with 0. We replace our m. Oop, that should be m. I got a little ahead of myself. And then we replace that with 1/7 plus b. Solve, and we get b equals 0. And therefore, we get y equals 1/7 x. Very similar to the problem before. This is undefined slope. We are looking for 0 slope, which is going to be y equals 7. This 7 right here has nothing to do with this 7. It just is a coinky-dink. Here, we're actually putting what we've just done in all of these problems beforehand into a situation in the real world. So we're going to be using these 2 points to find slope. Here's where we subtract our y's on top and our x's on the bottom. And we see that here we get our slope is equal to 35. Same as before. All right, so we're going to be using y equals mx plus b. And we're replacing. Here you get to choose which point. I could have chosen this point here, but I just kept it here. So I replace my y value with 45. I replace my x value with 1 plus b. And I solve, and I get b is equal to 10. So I know that my linear equation is this here, which is plugged in here. Asking how fast the car is traveling is another way of asking what is the slope. This is the rate of change. So we're talking about miles per hour. And then asking how far the individual was from the home initially is another way of asking it, what is the y-intercept? So we can see that here. So that is when we plug in 0 for our x, and we get 10, which is right here. And then here, a little bit of different. A lot of students make the mistake of putting how far the individual is far from home in 3 hours and 15 minutes. A lot of students plug in 3.15, but we must think of hours are not in terms of out of 100. They're out of 60 minutes. So 15 out of 60 is the same as 1 out of 4, which is 0.25, which is where I got 3.25 to plug into the equation from the start. You just simply plug that in, and we find out that we get 123.75 miles. Here, finding the 0 is simply setting your y equal to 0. And here we see f of x, which is just a very fancy way of saying the function with respect to x. And therefore, I plug in 0 for f of x or y, depending on how you like to write it. Solve for the x, and I get x equal to 6. And number 8, we're simply just doing the same thing as above, except here we have some decimals to deal with. So we just simply replace f of x with 0, distribute our 2 here to get 2 minus 6, distribute our 5.5 here to get this here. We collect our like terms, solve for x, and we get negative 43.5 over 9. Now, some of you might put that into your answer and get it incorrect. It's because it's asking for a simplified fraction. And as you can see, negative 43.5 over 9 is simply not a simplified fraction. So we can. I mean, that's just rude and ugly to have to put a decimal on top. Seriously, who does that? It's 2020. So what you're going to want to do is move, or we simply multiply the top and the bottom by 10, and I get negative 435. Not over 9, but over 90. Here I divide by 5. That gets me negative 87 over 18, which I know 3 goes into both of those. So I divide both of those by 3 to end up with my simplified fraction. Isn't it beautiful? Negative 29 over 6. Next problem, more of the same. We're simply just practicing all of these skills you've grown to love. So we distribute that 1/2 to give me 3y plus 2 minus 9. And on the other side, we're distributing that negative. Don't forget about that negative 1/7. And once we distribute that, we get negative y and positive 9. Once we get to this point, we add like terms and collect them. And then we solve for y, and I end up with y equal to 4. And number 10, we kind of work inside out here. So the first thing that I did was I distributed this negative to make this negative 2d minus 20. And then I distributed the 2 to get 2d plus 4. And this next step, I collected like terms to get here. I distributed the 2 to get here. And then I solved for d to get negative 2. Here we're looking at a compound inequality. I kind of like to solve these all at once. So when I subtracted this 8 to isolate the variable, I had to do that on both sides of the inequality, leaving me here. And then I'm multiplying by the reciprocal of 1/2, which is 2. It's led me to here. And then when we write this an interval notation, make sure here we have a less than or equal to, which means we're using a bracket. And we have just a less than, which means we are using a parenthesis. And all these problems I know you guys love. How much water should be added to an 18 milliliter of a 13% alcohol solution to reduce the concentration to 9%? We love it. So first of all, we have to find out how much alcohol is in that first solution, because that is going to remain the same. And so because we're adding water to it. So when we multiply 13% times 18 over here, we get there is 2.3 milliliters of alcohol. That is going to remain the same, so it's going to be part of our solution. So you see here in green, we need 9% or 0.09 times something that we're adding to that original 18% that will still equal 2.34. So this is how we're using that alcohol, because it is going to be the same in the original as well as the solution where we add water. And so instead of distributing that 0.09, I just divided by it. It seems a little bit easier. But if you want to distribute it, by all means. We do that, solve, and we get that we need to add 8 milliliters to change the concentration. Here we have one of those all too familiar shadow problems. So I just wrote equal proportions. So I have 4 feet for the height is proportional to a 14-foot shadow, and is equal to, we don't know the height of a 34-foot shadow. We cross multiply and divide to solve. And here it asks us to solve and round to the nearest tenth. So I got 9.71. 1 does not round that up, and we are complete.